Dave from Rosemount makes another good callback point regarding the pay-per-view period where you again felt as if you'd been taken advantage of. You felt like a sap. It was Tyson had a series of fights in which the fight would be over in 8 seconds, right? And to a certain extent, there was great awe related to that because of the power and the fury he could show. But on the other hand, it's like, that's it. $60 for 8 seconds? And that did become part of the ongoing joke at the time, an ongoing story. And part of the frustration was who he was fighting, I think. Although at that point, he was almost mythological. Like, it was like, well, no, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's just that powerful. He's that strong. Until when? Until the infamous night, I think it was in Japan, that he got upset by your guy, Buster Douglas. Buster Douglas, who I think we had on the show at least once or twice. I know we've had Foreman. We've had Evander Holyfield for sure. Yeah. Or maybe I've written about him.
Sludgy and I talked to Evander Holyfield at the Atlanta Final Four.
I remember that now, actually, yes.
About his barbecue sauce, which he didn't seem to have a great handle on.
How did his ear look?
His ear looked fine.
Looked fine?
The rest,
that's not so good.
It was choppy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
He's a fighter, after all.
We've got Russo Radio from the X.
I'm fielding texts from Edina people
about an hour.
Remembering the night at my friend's house.
Oh, is that right?
The boxing match.
They all have vivid memories of it.
We were all there.
You're all there.
It was nuts. But that's what you did.
Was there tension, though? Like, did you feel it when you walked in the door? Like, okay, I guess you're here. What are we going to do?
The nice thing about this is the Joe Polad neighborhood we're talking about, by the way.
Of course.
So I didn't get over there very often. But the nice thing about houses there is if there was tension, the houses were big enough where you could evade it. You could just go to another room. Go to another big screen.
Yeah.
Or in this case, go to the indoor pool. I think they had one of those, too. Not the side of town I grew up on.
Oh, I can't make that up. So Russo to talk hockey, hottest team in hockey, I believe. For the moment, we'll catch up with him. And does that mean, probably means no top 5 at 5, right? It's worth noting that your guy, Sam Darnold, went full today in practice. I don't think there's a lot else from an injury standpoint to get into for the Vikings, but that's big because I don't think there was great concern on the basis of that alleged tackle attempt. Where it seemed like he might have messed up his hand a little bit, but he didn't go full yesterday. We are told Sam Darnold did go full today. So,
do I dare say he was limited?
Right. Well, you could.
Another game with 3 picks, I might have to.
Yeah, if he gets 3 more, you probably would. You'd almost be obligated, I think, to go down that road.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Letters. Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
JG at KFAN.com if you'd like to get in on the fun. Dear Dr. Dan, I'm not sure what kind of doctor you are, but I'm hoping you are a psychologist. I recently realized I have a problem I might need help with. People have been calling me things like gunslinger coach, too in love with explosives, and pass happy. I think my propensity to call risky downfield passes stems from my past. I came from a pass-heavy offense in college. I was so good, I made the NFL. But once there, I never really got to pass because I never really got to play. I decided to be a coach and even became offensive coordinator, but never really got to call plays there either.
Yeah.
Finally, I became a head coach, so I have all this pent-up desire to sling the rock, and I can't help myself, Dr. Dan. Please help me work through this problem. K. O'Connell.
Well, K. O'Connell, I mean, in fairness to him, FISA, fairness and savagery, I think we ran this last game a bunch. Now,
yes.
You can make the hell, we had like 200 plays, offensive plays from scrimmage. So it was hard to not do you basically do anything you wanted to. So, look, I mean, right now at the halfway point, Dr. Dan gives Aaron Jones the MVP award for this club. Even though we think the defense is more important than the offense, I refuse to underestimate that Jones, I believe, has become the first running back to actually have KOC reconsider his whole philosophy and hand the ball off more and give up the ball more. Now, I think what we're looking for now is not necessarily run even more than you've run previously, because they're running, again, a lot more than they used to, but passing differently, accepting the notion that just because you do want to call plays, and it's great to get that grin on your face when JJ's coming off the field and you're looking at each other like another 47-yarder, man. Just like we called it up, right, JJ? And you don't worry about that so much. You say, we'll take the 8 yards to Hawk. We'll take 12 yards to Oliver, who's suddenly, came here as a blocking tight end. And
what KOC do?
Has made a lot of, well, maybe that's it. Maybe we got to give him credit for that, too. So that to me would be the more important transition at this point. You love the passing game, but maybe moderate your desire to go downfield quite as often as you want to, because that could well mean 3 more interceptions in Tennessee, in Nashville on Sunday.
Did you happen to hear X's and O's this week with KOC? Not. It's always really good. And this last week, he addressed the egomaniac throwing the ball commentary. KOC did.
Oh, he did?
Because, as you mentioned, he ran the ball a bunch late. Yeah. He said, at some point, I got to do what I need to do to win the game. And it does me no good to be, as some would say, an egomaniac that just wants my play sheet to get called. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. I thought that was interesting and also good because he's right. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I don't remember if it was X's and O's or if it was one of the press conferences where he was talking to Darnold about what you just said, the checkdowns to Hawkinson and the chain-moving throws that aren't as sexy, but they're part of winning football. Basically how they were guarding JJ. And he said, as much as we want them to change how they're guarding JJ, they're not changing it. So we can't force it in there. And we've talked about that all week.
Yeah, very true.
And that's what he said to Darnold on the sideline, which I thought,
interesting.
Again, is
during
smart.
the game, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
As much as we would like for the picture to be different, and JJ's running free, that's not what this game is giving us. We have to be smarter. Now, is that self-serving for him to talk about that after the fact? And basically, so I'm telling him not to throw it. I'm telling him what we're seeing.
Yeah.
That's a cynical way of looking at it, but I thought both of those were interesting.
They are.
He is showing some growth as a head coach, I think.
He's paying attention to it. We've tried to help him, each for the last couple of years, really, for last, I think. How long has he been here? Is this year 3?
This is year 3.
The whole time he's been here, we've tried to work with him on that. And I'm glad he's podcasting the show a little bit. But I do think part of this is I like to know about the conversations he has with JJ because I do think that enters into this too. I really do. Because I think subconsciously a quarterback, and this isn't a shot at JJ at all, but I think subconsciously a quarterback can feel, even if the coach is saying what you suggest, this idea, I got to get the ball to him. And you don't want him to come off the field with that pained expression on his face. So part of the back and forth, I think, probably needs to include the Vikings' top wide receiver.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, I'm all the way here on the West Coast, but I'm hearing murmurs about some stuff going on in the cornfields, and some people questioning whether or not trading Cat was the right move. It seems that the team has no heart and no defensive identity. I ask you this, Dr. Dan. Who is able to motivate Rudy into once again becoming a defensive player of the year? While I can get under the skin of anyone, I also make every single person on the team accountable. No one is making each other accountable right now on that team from what I can see. You notice what's going on in Golden State? We're 9-2, Dr. Dan, and we're actually playing some defense. Our point differential is near the top of the league, and we're playing with, you guessed it, an edge. So when you wonder what's wrong with the Wolves, don't forget about old slow-mo. I brought law and order into both what Dr. Dan would like to call our offense and our defense. K. Anderson.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good callback. We did broach this subject yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, but look, I think, grew frustrated with some of the offensive liabilities of slow-mo. Maybe we didn't spend enough time on the other things he can do because, in all seriousness, on how many possessions, as part often of the second unit, how many possessions do you remember where he's pointing to people, his teammates? You go here.
Yes.
You go over there.
On both sides.
On both sides. Absolutely right. And he's one smart basketball player. There's no question about it. And you can see for the second unit, certainly, there's some suffering there. And what would happen with Slow-Mo was, if you're getting enough offense from him, he might play down the stretch, too. Something had to give. You aren't going to be able to bring everybody back. But it's a sneaky, especially, as I said, the second unit of this club, a sneaky loss. And maybe even within the locker room, a sneaky loss about a guy who didn't really seem all that shy about pointing out we got to do this, and this. Felt pretty confident that because of his resume and because of his knowledge, he could do that, and he was going to be allowed to do that.
I just had a flashback to the play where he moved Towns to the corner.
Remember that? Oh, yeah, that's right.
Remember that? It was in the playoffs,
That's right.
I think. He just pointed to Carl and said, go
that
to the corner.
was an offensive possession,
And
right?
then he set
Yeah.
that screen,
Yeah.
and he told him to go. I mean, that's just arousing basketball. We have not seen that this season.
Not once. You want to put a grand in somebody's hand and continue this after a short pause?
Or we could go to 27.
Oh,
what
we
do you
can.
want? What do you want to do?
Let's go ahead and take it now.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it and try to put a grand in somebody's hand.
The Fan and two men and a junk truck want to give you a shot to put a grand in your hand with our national cash contest. And the keyword for the 4 o'clock hour is grand. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword grand. That also gives people more time if they'd like to get into Dr. Dan's inbox. JG at KFAN.com.
More inbox now. As I mentioned, Russo at about 5:02 or so from the Fallness Vault. The Wild taking on the Montreal Canadiens later tonight. All the action can be heard right here on the Fan. I'm assuming Thursday Night Football will be on one of our sister stations then?
Should be on the plus.
KFAN Plus, you said.
KFAN Plus.
And that matchup is Eagles and who?
It is the Eagles, and I just looked at this. It's the Eagles, and it's another good team. It's a good matchup. Hang on. NFL.
I just saw the promo, and I can't
Washington.
remember. Washington,
Yeah.
that's right. That's not bad.
I'm not used to associating them as a good team.
Well, what's weird is the Eagles, we've all kind of early mocked them. And
Yes.
thought, well, what are they? Last year was weird. What do they got? But they got one of the best records in the league, don't they? Don't they have 2 losses?
They're 7-2.
7-2 like
Their
us.
coach is on the hot seat every
Yeah,
day. A month ago, he's yelling at fans.
Yeah.
He's bringing his daughter up to the press conference to not even address it. He's getting ripped everywhere, and all your guy Nick Sirianni's doing is winning.
That's all he can do.
Pretty impressive.
What do we got? Any more?
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, 4 field goals the other day. 4. And I've been listening to iHeartRadio all week and have not heard one great moment in a kick-ass offense. Sincerely,
And that's a fact.
B. Childress.
That's a great point. That would have been the opportunity to bring that out of mothballs. We've definitely used it post-Childress. We've used it in several other sports, too, if I'm not mistaken.
We could have used it for Gopher basketball last night.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I actually wouldn't mind hearing just how goofy it got on the broadcast. You know, even for Grimmer to sort of continue to try to inject some measure of excitement in a game in which the Gophers couldn't get to 16 points in the first half.
I went into local elementary school to pick up oldest son from basketball practice.
Yeah.
Got back in the car. I don't know what the score was. It was like, 12-6.
Right.
Got back in, and he's talking about, it's still great, though, to be in the barn on a Wednesday night. I'm just like, I don't think you believe that, Mike.
No. Well,
I love the barn.
stuck.
You know me.
Yeah.
It just cracked me up.
That is pretty funny.
Because I've had a few of
Well,
those.
here's the Dr. Dan guarantee. If the Vikings end up with 4 field goals again against Tennessee, while they dominate, time of possession, all that, we'll bring it back. Because you're right. We actually have had a couple of opportunities recently. Go for men's basketball. Even, hell, we could do like just a turnover medley when it comes to the Timberwolves.
That's
right?
true, yeah. We did the
And
Wild a couple times.
We've done the Wild a couple times as well. Yeah, I'm glad it's always helpful when the audience is more remindful of things from our past, and I'd sort of almost forgotten about
I
it.
think we did it last year for the Vikings. We do it about once a year.
Is that about right?
Where
Okay.
you'll send the talking points, and on top of the talking points,
Yeah.
it'll say,
Right.
do we do kick-ass offense? Or no, you'll always say, do we have time?
It never gets old.
No, because to find kick-ass offense, you really got to go through.
You do.
You really got to go through the game.
It does take some time.
It's a labor of love, though, and it's worth it.
100%.
It's usually worth it.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, looks like I'm going to have some time on my hands. I'm a proven company man. I've really only worked for one organization and can corporate speak the press with the best of them. Any ideas about a possible fit in the new Trump administration? D. St. Peter. D. St. Peter. He'd probably be a good press secretary.
Probably would.
He's good with the talking points.
Yeah, I have no idea where his politics are. Don't want to even ask. Don't even want to go down that particular road. But he has said a couple times, I'm not retiring, correct? I think he has said, like, almost, so you get the feeling maybe he's got something else up his sleeve.
Yeah.
Maybe he is going to try to get away from all of it for a short period of time. As I mentioned when the story broke, I'm still kind of confused. Like, okay, we make these changes. Now Falvey's got both jobs. Save a little bit more money there, presumably. But then if somebody else owns the team, they're probably going to bring in their own, certainly team president. Now, some, new owners might say, I like the basketball administration or the baseball administration in terms of personnel. But even then, eventually the assumption is you're going to bring in your own people. So I don't know exactly. I'm still trying to understand what this accomplished. I guess in the short run, the Twins are saying, well, we're not sold yet. So somebody's got to be the team president. And I don't know what, I'm assuming St. Peter was making decent coin.
I would think so. President of the team.
Do you think Falvey got much of a raise, or do you think they said, hey, you know what? You're making yourself more indispensable with 2 jobs. No raise in it because we're still, right-sizing the payroll of everything. Or do you think he got like a bit of a bump?
I'm guessing he got a bit of a bump just for inflation,
but probably not as much. It's still probably cheaper than a whole nother salary, don't you think?
Definitely.
Yeah, so they saved that money. They got more money saved. That's what the Pohlads love to do.
Speaking of that,
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Letters. Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, last season, we made the mistake of saying the quiet part out loud when we slashed payroll by $30 million. This offseason, we have shuffled our front office staff and added roles to some people without salary increases. So without saying it out loud, we have also right-sized our front office. Dr. Dan, do you think we should investigate removing some positions from the players on the field and just put like the best 7 or 8 players out there on the diamond? Maybe it will help us sell this team faster if our books look even cleaner and leaner. This from my Edina brother, Jay Pohlad.
They probably have thought about it. Allegedly.
Do we have to play 9 guys? Do we have to have 25 on the roster?
It would be another way to shave things, give yourself a little more margin for error. There's no question about that. Dr. Dan is starting to get, as each day goes by, more and more apprehensive about how long the Pohlads are going to continue to own the team. And some people have already predicted that when next season starts, they're still going to be in charge. I'm worried that it's going to be like 2 or 3 more years, or they change their minds because they don't think they get the number they want, and we're stuck with them for in perpetuity. That would be, I think, for the average baseball fan, truly depressing.
Well, a lot of teams are still on the market, right? They have been for the while. White Sox are apparently entering the market too.
Yeah, that's right.
Only time will tell. You want to do a few walk-offs here?
Let's do it.
You can comment on these as you'd like.
Dan's Inbox.
Letters. Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, I didn't realize when I was drafted by the Timberwolves that C. Finch had the T. Thibodeau philosophy when it comes to playing rookies. From R. Dillingham and T. Shannon.
Ooh, nice shot.
R. Dillingham and T. Shannon. Anything you want to add there?
No, that's good enough on its own.
Dear Dr. Dan, don't know how to break it to you. We're 7-2. S. Darnold.
Yeah. Well, it's irrefutable. We've acknowledged that. But it's all about how you get there and how you're looking. And if the most recent games you've played have both been rather undistinguished victories, one at home and one on the road, you can't help but see it. I mean, if we didn't watch these games, maybe we could let them go a little bit more easily. But it's our job to watch them. If you're a Vikings fan, you want to watch them. And once you see them, you can't pretend you didn't see what you saw, which is some concerning trends, especially if we get 3 more picks from your guy S. Darnold on Sunday.
Dear Dr. Dan, I heard what El Nanny said about me on your show yesterday. To make him feel better, you can tell him I never would have come to Minnesota. Not enough Italian restaurants. That from P. Quinn. P. Quinn.
It's a nice callback.
And Dear Dr. Dan, it seems like the Timberwolves are struggling. They lack offensive flow and floor leadership. And more important, last night they shot less than 18% on three-pointers. I think I could improve upon that. After all, I'm not like anybody else. Atentamente, R. Rubio.
Is that El Mondello guy?
Yeah.
Because he texted that earlier, so I figured he'd take a second shot at getting it in.
The only guy that shoots more shots off of one pass than the Timberwolves is El Mondello guy.
Yeah, there's no question. I don't think anybody's close. By the
He's
way,
a volume shooter.
Did you see the cheap shot on Giannis last night? I think he was over 50.
59.
Is it 59? Did you see the cheap shot?
I did not.
That resulted in an ejection?
No.
It was...
Was it bad?
It was bad. It was... He gets around... I can't remember who the defender was, but he gets around him right under the basket, and as he is about to go up, he gets pulled down by the jersey hard.
That's not good. Goes
down hard on his back, and the player does the old just walk away like, what'd I do? It was bad. It was one of the dirtier plays I've seen in recent memory. And you know what's different about the culture? And maybe some people say this is a good thing. Nobody went after the offender.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of circled and that kind of thing.
Right.
Once upon a time, there would have been, if not actual punches thrown at him, there would have clearly been pushing, shoving, get the bleep out of here, etc. And now it was almost like everybody was too polite, even though it was a dirty play.
Well, they're smart. The NBA was smart in that to avoid all of that. Malice in the Palace.
Right.
I mean, it's an automatic suspension.
That's true.
Right? If you leave the bench. So I think players have been conditioned for that.
Even the players on the court, though, were surprisingly, I thought, docile about it at the time. Bottom of the hour pause. That's the inbox. Good job today. Good contributions as always. Russo Radio in about a half hour. I've got like a potpourri of a number of subjects that I want to try to explore, including a couple of good texts. So come on back.
Time now for the Vikings Report on The Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Viking safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite.
Ed in St. Paul is disappointed in me. Disappointed that you and Louie didn't discuss the new North Stars documentary. I've seen clips on the Fox 9 website. You're featured prominently. Looking forward to it tonight on Fox 9 Plus. Any additional thoughts? Well, in fact, I didn't realize it was coming out yet. I thought, in fact, we were going to have your guy on to help
Skinner.
to Sean to promote it.
Yeah.
So is tonight the premiere?
If that's what they're saying.
That's what they're going with. We'll accept it. I'm assuming it's going to run more than once. I have not seen it. I've just seen a couple of the clips, promotions of it, and I know they worked their asses off on it. I know they went very deep, Skinner and Company, for Fox 9. So I too am looking forward to it. And so you're 100% right, Ed. I should have brought it up. I guess I had lost track of when it was going to premiere because yesterday would have been the perfect time to talk to Louie. We'll still have a chance to do it probably next week, and we'll get a little bit more information on how often that is going to be available. And I'm assuming at some point that'll be available on Fox Local, right?
Oh, yeah. Everything.
Everything's available on Fox Local. That's the easy app. It's free. Gives you access to everything, including enough set episodes, pretty much anything Fox 9 related. Matt in Rosemount, the day of the Tyson Holyfield ear-biting kerfuffle, my neighbor had a pirate box and agreed to let me and a buddy splice his line and run a cable from his house to mine. It took me all day to do, and when the fight ended, I felt so robbed of all of my hard work. There's lots of stories like that, for sure. Judd in Chicago, Guardsy lamenting that he didn't grow up rich enough, needing to go to a friend's house to watch HBO. I can't even imagine such misery. As an underage college kid, writes Brian, we had the fight in our apartment. All of the kids wanted to show off to their hometown friends. I should say, all the hometown friends, I guess, paid us $100 to watch the fight.
Yep.
Filled our fridge with beer. Tyson bites Holyfield's ear, and then they left, forgetting all the beer in our fridge. We won twice that night. That's highly unusual. I don't think it would happen that way in Wisconsin, but apparently here.
No, there'd be no beer left. But that is the fun part about the pay-per-view stuff where, if it's $60 and you're by yourself, that's an L. But if you've got 10, 15, 20, 30 people and everybody's chipping in, it's a fun community deal. I think that's great. Do you remember where you were for the biting fight? I remember where I was.
I was covering it.
You were there?
I was there. I was in Vegas for that one, yeah. Because that was my famous correction. I think the original column I wrote, I had him bitten in the wrong ear. So I had to call. I mean, the only correction in the history of my career where I had to get it right. No, it wasn't I don't remember which ear it was, but I had to change left ear bitten by the other boxer to right ear bitten by the other boxer.
I think it was his right ear.
Yeah. That's
crazy. Did you know at the time that's what happened? Like when because Holyfield went nuts, obviously, the second time.
Where it dawned on us was you see like something getting spit out.
Yeah.
Oh. That's when and so we're all doing the kind of the double take. Like, what is that? What is that? What's a piece of his ear? So yeah, it was one of those macabre, no other sport could possibly duplicate that feeling kind of moments, for sure.
I bet you don't sleep after a night like that.
You can't.
Where it's just, and the whole city's buzzing.
Well, that was also the night,
described it.
As I recall it, too, after the fight and after writing, everybody ends up in the casino in one place or another, just walking through it. And there were like 2 or 3, exclamations like, he's got a gun. And then at that point, everybody in the casino would start screaming and diving under tables. And I don't think anybody had a gun in the casino that night, but it wouldn't have been that much of a reach.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's
what a time.
Yeah, crazy time for sure. Giannis elbowed him in the back, hooking him. Also elbowed him in the stomach. Giannis is known for elbows that don't get called. Stewart shouldn't have done it, but that's why he did. Sorry. I'm aware of all of that. If you see the play, now to me, this isn't even just a play that you get thrown out of. I think you should get suspended. It was awful. You're not going to convince me that there was nearly enough of what led to that for him to go down the road that he did, because he could have seriously been injured. I mean, seriously injured. The latest example...
90% of the bets going to Tyson this week, by the way.
90%?
Yeah, I just looked that up, but go ahead.
I guess I call it another come to Jesus moment for a prominent, pretty famous lefty. There's been a lot of that going on, post-election results. A few folks left of center trying to take a long, hard look at why the Democrats failed to the degree that they did. And it's almost like what you're seeing is, I don't know what the number is, but you're seeing more and more prominent Jets, I would say, head in sort of the Bill Maher lefty direction, which is, as I've said before, more, I think, classically liberal than it is conservative. And one rant that's gone viral, I think it was just in the last day or two, comes from a New York Times guy by the name of Ezra Klein, who's been around a long time. And we have quoted from him from time to time as well. I want you to hear, this is sort of, I think, Ezra's come to Jesus moment about why he thinks the Democrats did as poorly as they ended up doing on Election Day.
I come from outside Los Angeles. I lived in San Francisco until, 18 months ago, and I live in New York City. The thing that surprised me the thing that surprised me least about the election was the sharp red shift in these big cities. Because if you just talk to anybody who lives in them, they are furious. And this idea that oh no, the economy is actually good or crime is actually down, or this is all just Fox News, shut up with that. Talk to some people who live near you. The rage I just hear from people in New York, this is partially Greg Abbott busing huge amounts of migrants here, but that does mean, by the way, there are enough migrants that Greg Abbott could bus actual human bodies to New York City. And it was a big enough problem that New York City was not able to effectively deal with it, right? It does show that what was going on on the border was much worse. I think the Democrats were letting themselves accept. That was not, for all the cruelty of what Abbott did there, that was not like an ad campaign. Those were actual people who would come into the country who were overwhelming border states. The sense of disorder rising right? Not just crime, but homeless encampments, trash on the streets, people jumping turnstiles in subways, right? You just like crazy people on the streets. You just talk to people and they're mad about it. They feel it's different than it used to be. I mean, in San Francisco, like the fury is overwhelming. And you see that it's not just the presidential level. London Breed, the SF mayor, just lost re-election. In Oakland, they recalled the mayor. A bunch of the progressive DAs across the country were recalled or beaten in re-election campaigns. If Eric Adams has a lot of problems, but if he were obviously on the ballot, he would almost certainly, it seems to me, lose. You have to be able to govern well. People don't follow politics, but they live in the place they live. They see if prices have gone way up, and a bunch of economists telling them, no, don't worry about the price of everything, at least for some people. And maybe net, a slight majority of people, real wages have modestly outpaced inflation is like not going to do it, because people feel when they get a raise, that's them. And when prices are going up, that's you, the government, right? You, the government, screwed something up.
Again, this is Ezra Klein. This is not a hardcore righty. And I found it very instructive to hear. You can hear the frustration in his voice, because I mean, you could say, well, why play that now? We've already had so many things happen since, including some very interesting appointments to the cabinet, nominations to the cabinet by the president. And I'd say now's the perfect time, because I believe it gets back to one of the essential points of this election. If you're now asking the question, how can we end up with who we have about to ascend to the presidency again, to come back into power again, making some of the cabinet picks that he already has? John Bolton on Gaetz. Did you see his comments? Gaetz must be the worst nomination for a cabinet position in American history. This is something that falls well outside the proper scope of deference to a president nominating members of his senior team. Gaetz is not only totally incompetent for this job, he doesn't even have character or the civic virtue the founding fathers wanted. The Republican Party should oppose this nomination. And RFK Jr., it appears, is going to be HHS guy. Is that correct? It appears.
That's what it sounds like.
And we can argue about any of these individually, but if you're in the camp that says, I mean, to me, that's where the Democratic soul searching needs to continue. It's that old line from Saturday Night Live, going back to, was it Dukakis? Was it Dukakis, Bush?
I can't believe I'm losing to this guy.
And that was the line that who played
John Lovitz.
John Lovitz. At one point looks in the camera and says, I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. You lost to this guy. Again, that's who you lost to. And I firmly believe economy is number one on that. But I think what this particular hardcore lefty, again, a hardcore lefty, Ezra Klein, is saying, subjects that we've explored a lot on this show, contribute to it. I, like Bill Maher, refuse to believe that you can't be liberal and pay attention to these sorts of things. That if you do, you're back to giving sustenance to Fox News or the worst instincts or impulses of Fox News. I think there's room to be a liberal, not a progressive, a liberal, and express concern about a number of these issues. And I do believe for too many people, they thought, well, you're telling me I'm crazy on all of these things, including border issues, including stuff, locked up in the basic items locked up in my neighborhood drugstore. You're not. How can I take you seriously when you will not take those things seriously because you fear if you do, you're quote unquote, again, giving sustenance to the enemy? I think all that matters. By the way, speaking of savagery, I'm not even going to read it. Your guy, see if I can find. Dean Phillips is weighed in. Serving in Congress requires an unusually high bar for disbelief, but this one exceeds it by a mile. That's linked to a headline that reads, audible gasps when Gaetz is announced as AG choice. Fox News contributor Ben, is it pronounced Dominic? Domenech. Pretty famous guy.
Okay.
Google what he had to say about Matt Gaetz. And as a couple people suggest, he might as well have murdered him. I mean, you cannot get any more. He eviscerates him. This is, again, that's a righty we're talking about here, which I thought also made that kind of interesting. And now the concern is the obvious. Are we going to get recess appointments here? Because the feeling is that even Republicans aren't going to give Trump everybody he wants. Now, maybe this is all calculated and there's some he wants more than others. And then that'll become part of the game, the bartering game. May I quote your guy, one of your favorites of the Founding Fathers a long time ago, Alexander Hamilton? Senate's power to approve or reject a president's top nominees would tend greatly to prevent the appointment of unfit characters, including those who had no other merit than that of possessing the necessary insignificance and pliancy to render them the obsequious instruments of the president's pleasure. Now, he said that a long time ago, and it still fits. So that's, I think, the hope of some, even apparently some Republicans, that he can nominate who he wants. But the folks on Capitol Hill, they also have every right, many of them, by the way, just elected or reelected, to fulfill their own obligation and to vet these various characters and to approve some and to say, not going to work on any of the others. No top 5 at 5 today. However, as a consolation prize to each and every one of you, we've got Russo Radio from the Fallness Catacombs at the X. The Wild are back in action tonight at home, obviously, against the Montreal Canadiens. We'll catch up with Russo when we come back. What do you got for Russo Radio? Hit the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line 64686. He is at the X where the Wild return to home action tonight against the Montreal Canadiens. Welcome back to the program. What's the candle scent of choice in the Fallness crypt this evening?
Still 'tis the season. Must have been on sale at Target right now. It's just really
very Christmassy.
Like appley.
Oh, well.
I don't know.
It's a little
it's
early.
brutal. Yeah, it's I walked in there for a second and it gave me lightheadedness feeling.
Understandably,
and all that stuff. I already feel sick. Hey, Guardsy, are we allowed to play real music now?
On this show, we do. I edit it out.
Nice.
Yeah,
I like it.
I take the extra steps for the listeners.
That's the kind of guy he is. Yeah, it can't be on the podcast version.
I got you.
But it can be on the real. And that's true for every show. It's just different shows have made different decisions on what.
So what you're telling me is that when Brett produces for me, that he just doesn't want to go to the extra step.
That may well be.
Not everybody goes the extra mile like me, Russo. That's just the kind of detail guy that I am.
Yeah.
I go to the corners.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
I block shots.
I mean, we're really not supposed to talk about music much, right? But
ever.
Or ever.
Can't even acknowledge there is music.
That music exists.
I did not hear the Counting Crows to start this.
Please.
Omaha, one of my favorites.
That's exactly right. All right, so we're back home. And, again, we have to feel pretty good about the condition of the club, especially as little as we have been home. So give us kind of your 30,000-foot view of the current condition of your favorite hockey team or the team you cover.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're, 16 out of 20 points that they've gotten on the road, which is pretty unbelievable considering when the schedule came out and I looked and saw 10 of their first 15 away. You're just thinking, whoa, this could get a little hairy quick, even though some of the games have been, against beatable teams like Pittsburgh. You look at some of the losses actually, and you're just like, all right, could they have, where could they be if they've gotten that one in Philly or even the other night in Chicago? But they're playing, really quality hockey away from XL Energy Center. I think it's been probably because they haven't been here a little sporadic at home. They obviously got 4 out of 6 points the last homestand, but I didn't think they were great that homestand. And so that's the big thing tonight is you're playing a team like Montreal that's feeling a little good about themselves because they scored 7 the other night. They've had a couple days off to, bask in that. But they're not a very good team. So you want to see the Wild come out tonight and just, step on their throat right off the hop here and make this one an easy game and then get ready for the biggest test that they've had so far this season coming up on Saturday night against Dallas.
Louie and I were talking yesterday about Winnipeg, and I asked him the same question I want to ask you. Are they for real?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I thought they were going to take a step back this year, but a lot of it was it was recency bias of watching. I thought Connor Hellebuck was not very good in the playoffs last year. I know that he disagreed, even though he was shellacked in the first round, and so. But you look at them right now, and they're just playing great hockey. I watched the Ranger game the other day, and that game really was a one-sided affair in a tough building by Winnipeg. Anytime you win 15 out of 16, it's not a fluke. And guys like Scheifele and Connor are playing out of their minds right now. Josh Morrissey, obviously Hellebuck's Vezina alike again. But then they just got depth up and down their lineup. Velarde's been awesome. Niederreiter has been tremendous. Adam Lowry has been excellent. Pionk's been great as well. We have to see them more, and we will be seeing them coming up here in a week or so. Here at XL Energy Center, but yeah, they absolutely look like a legit formidable contender here in the Western Conference.
Gustafson in the net tonight, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you do wonder. I mean, and I like it. I do think that they've changed some things up. I think that they've had their plans and went against it. Like, I think Gus probably was supposed to back up that game in Chicago, but because he had played so well in Anaheim, that they wanted to go get those 2 points, and they really could have. As poor as the Wild might have played in the first two periods, they really should have won that game in the third period. They were that dominant. And he was outstanding in the chances that he had. And here's another game tonight where you wonder if to open the homestand that they were going to go with Fleury against Montreal, one of his last two games against the Canadiens. Obviously, I would assume that in January he's going to play in Montreal. But Gus has just been so good. And with Dallas coming in next, you want to give Gus a tee-up game for that and get his, if let's put it this way, if Gus doesn't start tonight, now suddenly you're playing him against a big division rival on Saturday with 6 days off. So I think that's one of the big thought processes in giving him this game.
Why did we lose to the Blackhawks?
Yeah, they just weren't very good in the first two periods. I definitely think the road trip was 100% part of it. It was a tough travel day where they, came, Pacific time zone to Central, traveled all day and then landed, late at night and then played 24 hours later. But when they needed to be good in the third period, they were outstanding. And as I said, I mean, that was a dominant game. You look at the analytics of that period and the Wild easily could have won that game. So, not very good in the first two periods. I thought Chicago played hard and well, defended hard, checked. But the Wild just didn't have their game in the first two periods. And it was almost shocking the way that after not having it the first two periods, they just found it in the third. And it was just in waves, just going after the Blackhawks. And, so obviously, not great to not get 2 points in that building against a team that had only won once at home all year. But to get 5 out of 6 on the road and the way that this season started, I don't think it's something to overreact to unless, all of a sudden they don't respond tonight here against Montreal.
I'm curious. I know we talked about it, I think, when the reports first surfaced, but since the team was just in Chicago, have you ever or do you continue to pay any attention to whatever that report was about, Kaprizov allegedly being kind of maybe, fascinated with Chicago or maybe Chicago being fascinated with him? Because I always felt like it felt manufactured to me a little bit. But you cover this stuff. You talk to people who wrote this stuff. What did you make of it, and what do you make of it now?
Yeah, I mean, it was my colleague, Mark Lazarus, that wrote it, and he has since, walked it back where he basically, he wrote something in the middle of a story that he wrote at the draft that Chicago was in a couple years. If Kaprizov was available, we're going to go after him. And then he just sort of conflated it in his own mind and turned it the opposite, where Kaprizov wanted to go there. And he looked back at what he wrote and corrected it the best he could. Nobody knows what Kirill Kaprizov is thinking, and to assume that just a reporter in Chicago is gonna know that is just, it's far fetched. And I love Laz. He just made a mistake there. But if you have a lot of cap space and you know that there's a chance that Kirill Kaprizov is going to be an unrestricted free agent in a couple years, you'd be a fool not to try to at least prep to go after him. So there's no doubt in my mind, if Kirill Kaprizov is available, that the Blackhawks, it would make all the sense in the world for them to go hard after him and try to do the hard sell and come into a huge city playing with Bedard and and some of the other top draft picks that they have or are going to have here in the next couple of years. So, I think it's a good thing that the Wild have gotten off to an excellent start. I think we know that with the cap going up big time, that nobody's going to be able to offer more than the Minnesota Wild, and nobody can offer a longer term than the Minnesota Wild. And Craig Leopold has made it extremely clear, publicly and privately, to his agent, Paul Theophanis, that will be the case. I think it's great that there's been communication between the two sides going back to even the day before the season started, where Paul was in town and met with the Wild. We were just out in San Jose and Anaheim, and Paul Theophanis was by the locker room in both games afterwards, talking with Craig Leopold and Bill Guerin. I'm not saying they're negotiating or anything like that, but just the fact that there's good communication right now and a good relationship between the sides is all that you can ask for at this stage, considering that they can't re-sign him until July 1st. So I don't think, obviously until Kirill Kaprizov is signed on the dotted line, I think everybody is going to be a little worried about it, but there's nothing that can be done right now. And the only thing that can be done right now is for him to continue to play well and the team to continue to show him that they can win. And then all of a sudden you get Zev Boyum here, and you get Danilo Urov here, and Riley Heidt and Hunter Hayde and Liam Ogren, and maybe Wallstedt eventually, and Damon Hunt, and you show him that you're equipped for a long-term success plan to be a contender here. That is going to be what he is mostly going to be looking for.
Speaking of Ogren, a 507 guy earlier wanted to know what the possibility is of bringing back Ogren anytime soon.
Well, I mean, they have a 3-game road trip coming up. A lot of it will depend if they get any significant injuries here against Montreal or Dallas going into that road trip. If he's going to be the 13th forward or the 4th line left wing, I doubt that they're going to bring him up. That's when you bring up a Mikey Milne, or you bring up a Travis Boyd to sort of just be the 13th forward, to have an extra guy on a road trip. But if all of a sudden they do lose a significant top 6 forward or a top 9 forward, it would make sense for them to eventually bring him back here pretty quickly, because then he would be playing regular minutes in significant situations. Right now, it's good that he's down there. He's playing well. He got a hat trick the other night, his first professional hat trick in North America, and that's what you want. I mean, you don't want him playing. If he was going to go on that road trip just now, he would have been the 13th forward. That's not what you want a 21-year-old right now having. He should be playing in Iowa. I think it's good that he's down there, and same thing with Wallstedt. Right now with their goaltending being so good here in Minnesota, there's just no use having him up here, being in and out of the lineup, things like that.
Another interesting text. Paul claims that this morning you said the Wild need to get a new second line left wing, one who can get an assist once in a while. Is that an accurate?
That sounds like something I would have said. Yes.
Okay, and so expand on it. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I just think that right now, look, their second line has been good analytically. Expected goals, things like that. I want to see actual goals, and Marcus Johansson playing with Joel Eriksson and Matt Boldy has 1 goal and 0 assists in his last 13 games. That's truly unbelievable. I don't care what the analytics say. So basically what I've been saying is that if the Wild could accrue cap space this year and not waste it, which is the importance of staying out of LTIR, I think that's the big thing that I think that Bill Guerin should look for going into the trade deadline. And say, if this team is going to be a true contender, I do think that they're going to need production from that second line more so than they're getting at even strength. And I think helping that, getting a left wing there that could help in that situation would help. Now, Marcus hasn't been bad. He's just not producing right now. I mean, that line is not getting scored upon for the most part. Even those shifts where they've had 3 or 4 hairy shifts here in the last couple of weeks, where they are just starting in that LA game where they're just getting peppered in their own end. But Gustafson's saving the day when that has happened. So that's why the analytics have looked a little better than probably should be. But I think that Marcus should be producing much more when you're playing with 2 talents like that.
The follow-up question from that same texter is there anybody in the Wild youth group who could step up as an upgrade at that spot?
Well, I think that Liam Ogren could produce. I don't know if he would be nearly as good defensively. I mean, the one thing I'll say about Marcus is he is a lot more engaged this season. Johansson is worked his butt off. He's done everything they've asked from that standpoint. The points are just not coming. He had a couple posts in Anaheim. And so if if a couple of those go in, it looks a lot better. I thought he was really, really good in San Jose, actually, in that game. I don't think anybody was very good in Chicago for the first two periods, but he got better in the third period. Ogren would be the one guy I would think. But otherwise, I think it would have to be an external move at some point this season.
Are we making, with this coaching group and head coach, more line changes than we have in the past, or about the same? What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing, Dean was always loath to make in-game changes or even between-game changes. I mean, we saw it right when John got here, right? A week of watching Zuccarello and Kaprizov together, and he split them up last December, and that's when Kaprizov absolutely went on a tear alongside Boldy and Eriksson Ek on that line. And we saw in Chicago the other night, it was so obvious the first two periods that the Wild just they did not have it. And so, the way John Hines explained it after the game, when he went into wholesale line changes in the second period where everybody played with everybody, in the third period, he went with consistent lines until the end when he actually made an incredible line change that I had never seen before, where Boldy centered Kaprizov and Zuccarello. And let's be honest, we know that Boldy has been a winger here his entire career. So that was a first that I remembered, other than what John said that he experimented for a little bit in a road exhibition game in Chicago at some point before the season. But for the most part, the line changes in the third period were consistent. The second period, everybody played with everybody, and he explained it that a lot of times when you feel a team is sleepy and just doesn't have it, sometimes you do that to basically make them alert because they got to pay attention who they're playing with, make sure they don't get too many men penalties, things like that. So he's done a lot of that in game. He's done a lot of stuff. We talked last week, you and I, Dan, about how he has recognized late in periods. If there's an offensive zone start, he'll throw Kaprizov out there. He'll put Kaprizov on the fourth line at times if there's not a lot of special teams, just to get him some ice time. We saw I think it was maybe the LA game or the Toronto game where there was a lot of penalty kills that it might have been Anaheim, actually, where in Anaheim, the Wild, I can't remember which game it was, but we saw a situation where Kaprizov was essentially taken out of the period because the Wild took back-to-back penalties. And so all of a sudden you just saw him load up Kaprizov in different situations to give him with different players. So I like the way that he's coaching the team right now. And I do think that the other night he made some really quality changes. I thought his best change that he made was putting Marco Rossi with Ryan Hartman and Marcus Foligno, which, remember, that was supposed to be the line in training camp. And I thought the three of them were outstanding together. I thought Hartman and Rossi had 4 scoring chances total in that period. And that makes me think that that's one thing that he's going to always keep in the back of his head if he needs to spur this team along by putting that group together again.
I'm probably getting a little ahead of it here, but given the promising start to the season, is this team going to be, if they stay, maybe not quite this hot, but very relevant and very much in the playoff, automatically in the playoffs, are we in position from a resource standpoint to be able to do anything interesting?
Yeah, I mean, that's why they've got to stay out of LTIR. And I was trying to tell that to Wild fans that were all excited when Jared Spurgeon was hurt and like, oh, is this going to get us into LTIR where they could go and spend $7.5 million? The goal is to accrue space to stay below the cap ceiling. So then you just, in a league where there's a daily cap, you're just constantly accruing, where all of a sudden at the trade deadline, you might actually be able to go and acquire a $7-8 million, hockey player, not one that would, a prorated one. So, go out and go maybe get a Brock Nelson or somebody of that ilk. So I think that is the key. I think that's something that Bill Guerin would really hope to do at some point this season is go and make that type of move. But to do that, you're going to have to accrue space and make sure that they don't get into a tough situation. So they've got to keep on, winning games here. So far, so good. They got to stay out of their injury issues. Obviously, Brodin's dealing with something right now. John Hines said that it happened in Chicago the other day. I think that if it's the same thing that I saw, I think that Jonas had actually been dealing with something going into that game because he was getting worked on all that morning as well. So clearly something's going on with him. So if they can get him healthy here, they're calling it day-to-day right now. It's important for him to be back in the lineup, I think, on a consistent basis, because right now, tonight, they're going to go with Chisholm, Merrill, and Bogosian, and one of those three is going to be in the top 4, and that's obviously not something that I think that is ideal. So Maybe at some point we see Damon Hunt get a shot here as well. But right now they got to just stay out of the injury issues and continue to win games.
Thank you very much, as always, for the time, and we will chat next week, if not sooner.
Anytime. See ya.
Thank you. Russo Radio helping us out as only he can do from the X. Wild in action tonight. And our show it will be shortened because we've got some Vikings programming to get into.
See ya.
And then, thank you. Was that Fallness?
It was.
Yeah, it sounded like Fallness. Well, that's quite a contribution from him. He's probably tuckered after all how hard he worked for Wild Wine Line. Not Wine Line, but what's the Wild Weekly? Didn't you say like every interview was pre-taped?
You want to ask him?
Oh, you still there, Fallness?
Yeah, what's up?
Well, you're kind of, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of tension between you and the show, and I think most of it's
There's
between
zero tension.
you
What
and
are you
Gargi.
talking about?
And
There's daily tension in the inbox.
Well, the inbox is daily tension.
yeah.
64686.
And beyond that,
We all know your number now, memorized.
And Gargi mentioned that, for all your talk about blue collar work ethic and so forth, that basically Wild Weekly yesterday was what, like the second segment was like 18 minutes of Kaprizov from 2 years ago.
No,
Right.
it was actually from that day. And what I did is I had the play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Wild, Mr. Joe O'Donnell.
Yeah.
We're trying to pave some inroads there with the star player on this Minnesota Wild team. So I said, Joe, why don't you, because I could have done the interview. I was there as well. But I said, Joe, you go talk to Kirill Kaprizov. And it wasn't 18 minutes. It was 5.5. But that was the second part of the show last night.
Well, yeah, but see, you're making it
You
sound
guys
like...
exaggerate stuff on this show.
We do? Well, here's the thing. I mean, you're making it sound, this is brilliantly played, like, well, I'm so selfless that
Right.
But what it is, yeah, I mean,
You're like
you get out
Kaprizov just looking for Zuccarello.
of... You
You're
get
just-
out of work.
Yeah,
you
just
can prep for the show in like 14 seconds.
I was there though. It's not like I didn't. I went home and went to bed. I was there while it happened. I
Okay.
just said, Joe, why don't you do it? And he said, okay, Mr. Fallness, and we got it done. It was awesome.
Who's doing Let's Play Hockey tonight? Do we know?
I do believe. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure it's Shane Hudella. It's a Veterans Appreciation Night here
Nice.
at XL
Okay.
Energy
Excellent.
Center. So,
Makes some sense.
yep,
Veterans
it should be
Day.
awesome.
That's outstanding. All right, we'll see if you can get it done because you can't screw this up now and start losing at home, right? The idea here is take full advantage of having been on the road and being as successful as a team is. You can't come back and call it a schedule loss if you lose.
The biggest part about this is you talk about the soft part of the schedule. They've got 4 teams that are circling the drain in the NHL standings. So
there you go.
You got to take care of business
That's it.
here, and then you get the mighty Dallas Stars in a Central
There's a big one.
Division
Yeah.
collision come Saturday night
That's
at XL
big.
Energy Center.
That should be fun. Fallness, don't forget to blow out the candles because I don't want any fire issues inside the X. That'd be very unfortunate.
Keep it tight on the post-game show, too. We got to get back to Fox Sports Radio as soon as it's done.
Wait till you hear the post-game show on Black Friday on Cool 108. It's going to be magical. It's going to be
No
extended.
bitterness at all, yeah.
Not surprised at all.
We'll get you back to Alan Parsons' project after this with Christmas bells.
That's
But
it.
First, here's more from Kirill.
Thanks,
All right,
Fallness.
boys.
Be
See
good.
ya.
That is the one and only Kevin Fallness from his crypt, basically, in the bowels of the X. I mentioned we're out. We're going to have one more quick segment, and then we're going to turn it over to Vikings programming, and then, indeed, head out to the X for Wild versus Canadian.
Fan.
Fan and 2 men and a junk truck want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand. It is our national cash contest. Final keyword of the evening is money. Go to KFAN.com. Enter the keyword money. The show wrap is brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
The state of basketball in Minnesota right now, rather appalling. Not going to lie, the Golden Gophers managed all of the men's basketball team, all of 14 points in the first half against mighty North Texas.
The next question
And
is high-level
even though they had a
stuff here.
relative explosion in the second half, they still did find a way to lose. One of those games that, given the condition of the program, you just simply cannot afford to lose. And to boot, later that night, of course, your Timberwolves got swept in the second game of the back-to-back against the Portland Trailblazers. Did some things better than they did the night before, some things worse. And now that they are back to a rather mediocre, especially in the Western Conference, 6-6, how close are you to fearing we're headed back to play-in territory.
Play-in territory? I'm not there yet. A little
early.
It's a little early.
But
I'm holding out hope.
Let's just say the signs compared to a year ago are not headed the right direction. There are a number of very disconcerting things. And I mentioned earlier, you go back to what Johnny reminded us of. They had not, first time they lost 3 games in a row last year was in the postseason, right? The Dallas series.
I think it was Denver.
Actually, Denver. I'm sorry. You're right. The Denver
they won
series.
the first 2, lost the middle 3.
You're right. Which speaks to their consistency last year. And that's when we talked about the old cliche about being a serious team. That's when I think we knew we had a serious team, right? A team that actually took it personal, a 3-game losing streak. And that ship has obviously sailed. We know there's changes to the lineup. We know there's lots of time to try to deal with that. The big trade was right before training camp. Reminder also that Portland had 3 of its top 7 players out yesterday. That's the game that after you embarrass yourself the first night, if you're a real team, you're absolutely positively not supposed to lose. And I don't know if the effort was lacking again last night, but what I'm starting to sense a little bit is the players don't know what the hell to do. And this is a time when the head coach is going to earn his money. I think they're looking for direction from him. And what I'm curious to know is whether we might even see, as I suggested, any lineup changes, as in starting lineup. And that stuff can get overrated because the cliche goes it's more about who finishes anyway. But I'm wondering if that might be something under consideration. Just take different looks at different combinations of players together. Are we going to see, because we should, actually a willingness to play more players, to experiment with more possibilities? Because from an energy standpoint, it just ain't quite there right now. We know about the turnovers. We know about the defensive woes, which is probably, which is obviously very high on the list. And let's face it, like I said, if it were up to me, I would definitely entertain putting Naz Reid in the starting lineup. His numbers are tremendous. Now, defensively, is he perfect player? No. But I would do it if you have the cojones to say to Randall, we're going to try this for a while. We're going to see, maybe for you, it's a different kind of approach coming off the bench as a duo, perhaps, with his old New York Knicks teammate.
That's true,
know.
Dante. That might work.
That might work just to sort of change some things up. And you can argue the offensive numbers that Reed is putting together again are tremendous.
They are.
Early. Certainly from a shooting standpoint, he plays faster. Sometimes for me, he falls in love with the 3 a little bit too much. But
same.
But, you'll see him occasionally drive. I'd like to see him do a little bit more of that. And when he drives, unlike when Cat drives, he doesn't usually end up on the ground.
No, but he turns it over more, I think.
He does turn it over
about the same.
You're probably right about that. So I don't even know when we play next. Is this road trip continue?
I believe the road trip is done. I think their next game is Sunday against the Red Hot Phoenix Suns.
Ooh.
I believe. Sunday afternoon.
Team we swept.
We did.
And they might have something to say about that right now because they're playing well.
They are. Durant's hurt.
Oh, is he out? Okay.
Yeah, I think he's banged up. But Tyus Jones is there. Oh, wow. No, we play the Kings on Friday night.
Oh, it is Sacramento. Is that
tomorrow night? It's there.
It's there still. Yeah, I thought there might be one more game on the road trip. And then we come back, is what you're saying.
Man, we're at Sacramento tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's good luck. Didn't we already play that
We beat them once. It was a good win.
That was an early...
It was a substantive win.
You were all looking for that's the team I remember.
Yes.
And they had stretches in that game where that's what we said.
They did. It was the second game of the year.
But it's got to be more than one every 6 games, right? Or one every 4.5 games. It's got to be a lot more often than that. Today, if you missed earlier parts of the show, Sean Salisbury could not be with us today. Any shot at him tomorrow, you think? Or does it look like he might just be out?
Yeah, he says he's giving a leadership speech at Texas A&M tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So he's out tomorrow.
All right, he's
I
out
had to
tomorrow.
double check that.
All right. So we miss him this week, but we did have a very good series of contributions for the inbox from the listeners. That was between 4 and 4:30, and Russo from the X between 5 and about 5:25 or so as well. Tomorrow, so tonight, we're out for Vikings, the Vikings podcast and tailgate. Then Wild Montreal on the Fan tonight. You can get the Thursday night NFL game on the Plus, and that, you remind me, is matches the Philadelphia Eagles against the Washington
Commanders.
Guardians.
It's the Cleveland Guardians.
It's the Cleveland Guardians. I have no idea why I have that on my brain. Well, I guess it's the old redone nicknames.
Yes.
And I kind of mix those up from time to time.
It makes sense.
Tomorrow, so no Salisbury tomorrow, but we will have picks. We will have Ben Gessling. We will have Lavelle. You're going to be on the road again, right? You got women's basketball.
We're
days?
heading to Tempe, Arizona.
Oh, that's not bad.
2 games
This time of
Saturday
year,
and Sunday.
Dry heat, right?
Yeah, although the weather here,
like in the 80s there, 70s?
it looks like
What's it?
70s, 80s. Yeah,
That sounds pretty good.
It'll be good.
Fancy resort?
No.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I think it's a Hyatt house.
You know what it is? It's a work trip.
It's a business trip.
Business trip is what it is. That's
All
for
business.
Sure. Hope you can score more than 14 points and a half. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will talk to you tomorrow, starting all over again at 3 o'clock.
Thank you, everybody, for coming here.